Leo Kubiak, 99 years old. Harry Donovan, 99 years old. Bob Cousy, 97 years old. Richie Guerin, 94 years old, a respected legend of his generation. Cliff Hagan, 94 years old, remembered as a star of the early NBA. Bob Pettit, 93 years old, one of basketball's greatest early legends. Hubie Brown, 92 years old, a legendary voice and mind of basketball. Dave Gamby, 89 years old, a veteran of the NBA's early era. Bailey Howell, 89 years old, a two-time NBA champion and true legend. Wayne Embry, 89 years old, pioneer both on and off the court. Oscar Robertson, 87 years old, one of the greatest players in NBA history. Satch Sanders, 87 years old, an eight-time NBA champion. John Block, 83 years old, a respected veteran of the league. Rick Barry, 82 years old, an NBA champion and Hall of Fame legend. Earl Monroe, 82 years old, one of basketball's most iconic stars. John Wetzel, 81 years old, a longtime figure from the NBA's early years. Fred Carter, 81 years old, a respected basketball veteran. Walt Frazier, 81 years old, a Knicks legend and NBA icon. Phil Jackson, 80 years old, the legendary coach behind 11 NBA championships. Bill Hoskett, 79 years old, a veteran of basketball history. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, 79 years old, one of the greatest legends. Bob Dandridge, 78 years old, a two-time NBA champion. Dave Cowens, 77 years old, a former NBA champion and MVP. Nate Archibald, 77 years old, an NBA legend and Hall of Famer. Dan Issel, 77 years old, a six-time All-Star and basketball great. Spencer Haywood, 77 years old, a pioneering force in professional basketball. Mike Newland, 77 years old, a veteran of the NBA. Jim Chones, 76 years old, an NBA champion. Artis Gilmore, 76 years old, one of the most dominant centers of his era. Don Buse, 75 years old, a respected NBA defensive specialist. Ernie DiGregorio, 75 years old, a former Rookie of the Year. George Karl, 75 years old, a legendary NBA coach. George Gervin, 74 years old, the iconic Iceman Bob McAdoo, 74 years old, a former MVP and NBA champion. Jamal Wilkes, 73 years old, a four-time NBA champion. Robert Parrish, 72 years old, a four-time NBA champion. Alex English, 72 years old, one of the NBA's greatest scorers. Adrian Dantley, 71 years old, a six-time NBA All-Star. Ricky Green, 71 years old, a respected veteran point guard. Bernard King, 69 years old, one of the most explosive scorers of his generation. Larry Bird, 69 years old, a three-time NBA champion. Reggie Theus, 68 years old, a longtime NBA guard and veteran. Kevin McHale, 68 years old, a seven-time All-Star. Dominique Wilkins, 66 years old, one of the greatest dunkers. Magic Johnson, 66 years old, a five-time NBA champion. Isaiah Thomas, 65 years old, a two-time NBA champion. James Worthy, 65 years old, a three-time NBA champion. John Stockton, 64 years old, the NBA's all-time assists. Clyde Drexler, 63 years old, Hall of Fame superstar. Patrick Ewing, 63 years old, one of the greatest centers in NBA history. Hakeem Olajuwon, 63 years old, a two-time NBA champion. Charles Barkley, 63 years old, one of basketball's most iconic power forwards. Michael Jordan, 63 years old, a six-time NBA champion. Karl Malone, 63 years old, one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. David Robinson, 60 years old, a two-time NBA champion. Reggie Miller, 60 years old, one of the greatest clutch shooters ever. Scottie Pippen, 60 years old, a six-time NBA champion. Gary Payton, 58 years old, the legendary glove and NBA champion. Shaquille O'Neal, 54 years old, one of the most dominant centers ever. Jason Kidd, 53 years old, an NBA champion and legendary point guard. Steve Nash, 52 years old, a two-time MVP. Allen Iverson, 51 years old, a fearless scorer and basketball icon. Ray Allen, 51 years old, an NBA champion. And Kevin Garnett, 50 years old, an NBA champion and defensive powerhouse. Tim Duncan, 50 years old, a five-time NBA champion and one of the greatest power forwards ever. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more NBA legends.